In recent years, Hollywood has become a battleground for free speech, political correctness, and a culture war that shows no signs of slowing down. At the center of this storm is comedian Rob Schneider, who has taken a firm stand against what he views as the oppressive force of wokeness in modern culture. With Hollywood increasingly leaning towards modern ideals, Schneider's refusal to comply has turned heads and sparked heated debates across the entertainment industry. The comedian, who rose to fame with his roles in Saturday Night Live and popular films like Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, has now become a controversial figure for his controversial critiques of what he sees as an overreach of political correctness. But why has Schneider's viewpoint made such waves in Hollywood, and what does it signify for the larger societal debates we are witnessing today? At a time when comedians are often cautious about offending audiences, Schneider has been vocal about his belief that comedy should not be censored. For him, the fundamentals of comedy lie in pushing boundaries, challenging societal norms, and poking fun at the absurdities of life. He believes that the rise of wokeness has created an environment where comedians are afraid to speak their minds, leading to what he calls the death of comedy's edgy, unfiltered nature. Schneider's concern is not just about the humor itself, but about the broader implications of what he sees as a growing culture of self-censorship. Schneider has expressed these views on multiple platforms, including social media and various interviews. One of his most notable appearances was on the Glenn Beck program in 2021, where he spoke about how the fear of being cancelled is hurting comedy. "The minute you start censoring yourself, you're not a comedian anymore," Schneider said. He believes that the job of a comedian is to make people uncomfortable, to challenge them to think, and to address issues that others might be afraid to touch. In Schneider's view, if comedians are constantly worried about offending someone, they're no longer able to do their jobs effectively. Schneider's critique of wokeness also touches on a deeper societal struggle: the shifting definitions of liberalism and conservatism. Traditionally, liberalism supported free speech, individual rights, and an open marketplace of ideas. However, in today's cultural climate, many of these values have shifted, with some progressive circles arguing for stricter controls over what is considered acceptable speech in the name of equality and protecting marginalized groups. Schneider isn't the only comedian to voice concerns about the impact of political correctness on comedy. Well-known figures like Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais have also spoken out against the growing pressure to conform to woke standards. Like Schneider, they argue that comedy should be a space where nothing is off-limits, and that humor should be allowed to offend and provoke thought. However, Schneider's viewpoint seems to go even further, as he positions himself not just as a critic of wokeness, but as a defender of free speech in comedy, making him a divisive figure in today's cultural landscape. Schneider's critiques of wokeness tap into a deeper societal debate about the changing definitions of liberalism and conservatism. Traditionally, liberalism fought free speech, individual rights, and the free exchange of ideas. However, Schneider argues that in today's cultural climate, these values have shifted. Many progressives, he claims, are now advocating for stricter controls on what can be said or joked about, particularly in the name of equality and protecting marginalized groups. This shift, according to Schneider, has made the entertainment industry a place where obedience is expected, and even mild jokes can be deemed offensive. But his supporting fans went out on X stating, "He tells jokes. He was hired to tell jokes. If you can't take a joke, you deserve to be as miserable as you are." Schneider has spoken about how different Hollywood feels compared to when he first entered the industry. He recalls a time when artists were encouraged to challenge authority and question societal norms, but now he feels that there's an expectation to fall in line with a specific set of beliefs. For Schneider, this change represents a fundamental shift in the values that once defined liberalism and the entertainment world. The changing cultural landscape has also affected the world of comedy. What was once seen as a largely liberal space, where comedians could push boundaries without fear of consequences, has now become a battleground for opposing views on what comedy should be. On one side, there are those like Schneider who believe that comedy should remain edgy, unfiltered, and free from the limitations of political correctness. On the other side, some comedians support a more socially conscious approach, often referred to as woke comedy, where jokes are more mindful of sensitive topics and the potential harm they might cause. Scheider's decision to align with the former group has drawn both praise and criticism. He's become a hero to many who feel that wokeness is oppressing creativity and free speech, but he's also faced backlash from those who argue that his views are outdated and harmful. Some haters even went as far as to say, "I was shocked to find out Google considers you are a comedian or an actor for that matter." This divide reflects a broader societal conflict between the desire for more inclusive, respectful discourse and the fear that too much sensitivity will erode the kind of free expression that comedy relies on. Scheider's critique of wokeness isn't limited to the world of comedy. He sees it as part of a larger societal struggle over free speech and the growing pressure to conform to certain ideas. This issue has become a flashpoint in academic life, media, and politics, where there is increasing concern over self-censorship and the discrimination of opposing voices. In universities, for example, there is a growing debate over whether free speech is being oppressed in the name of inclusivity and protecting disadvantaged groups. Scheider has drawn parallels between this trend and what he sees happening in comedy. For him, comedy has always been one of the last forts of free speech, a space where people could express controversial or unpopular opinions without fear of being silenced. However, as more comedians face backlash for their jokes, Scheider worries that comedy is becoming just as censored as other parts of society. One of Scheider's key concerns is the fear of being cancelled for saying the wrong thing. The rise of social media has made it easier than ever for public figures to be called out, criticized, and in some cases, blacklisted for their comments or actions. This fear of cancellation, Scheider argues, has created a chilling effect, where comedians are now more hesitant to address important issues or make jokes that might offend. This self-censorship, in Scheider's view, is dangerous because it limits the scope of comedy and restricts the kind of humor that can provoke meaningful conversations. He believes that if comedians are constantly walking on eggshells to avoid offending anyone, they're missing out on the opportunity to address some of the most important issues of our time. For Scheider, comedy should be a space where people can laugh at the absurdities of life, confront uncomfortable truths, and challenge societal norms without fear of backlash. One of the most controversial points in the debate about wokeness and free speech is the concept of hate speech. While most agree that genuinely harmful or violent speech should be restricted, critics like Rob Scheider argue that the definition of hate speech has become overly broad. In Scheider's view, the label of hate speech is now often applied to any opinion that differs from the mainstream cultural narrative, especially when it comes to controversial topics like race, gender, and identity. This, he believes, is a way to silence voices that don't comply to accepted norms. Scheider and others who share his views argue that by expanding the definition of hate speech to include dissenting opinions or jokes that make people uncomfortable, society is heading down a slippery slope. Many of his fans support this idea throughout social media, stating, "Isn't it amazing that free speech isn't so free? It's free when it agrees with you. The minute you are offended, the free part goes out the window." If anything that offends someone is labeled hate speech, the argument goes, we run the risk of oppressive open debate and creating an environment where only the most inoffensive, sanitized ideas are allowed to be expressed. This trend is particularly evident on social media platforms, where comments or jokes that go against progressive ideals are quickly labeled as harmful or offensive. For Scheider, this is a form of censorship disguised as progressive ideology, and he warns that it could have serious consequences for freedom of expression. He has called out this phenomenon in various interviews, saying that society is losing its tolerance for differing viewpoints and instead embracing a form of authoritarianism under the disguise of protecting marginalized groups. Scheider's concerns about the impact of wokeness on comedy are part of a broader conversation about the role of comedy in defending free speech. Historically, comedians have served as societal critics, using humor to shine a light on hypocrisy, challenge authority, and question societal norms. Legendary figures like George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and Lenny Bruce made their mark by pushing the boundaries of acceptable speech, often at great personal cost. In Scheider's view, comedy's ability to provoke thought and confront uncomfortable truths is essential to its power, and he worries that this is being lost as more comedians shy away from potentially offensive material. A fan of Rob Schneider and the legends of the past went all out stating, "Who knew that the funny men of our past are now the voice of morality of our present? This just shows how far society has fallen when our comedians make more sense than college professors." For Schneider, the key to good comedy is its ability to make people uncomfortable. Comedy is supposed to make people think, he has said. It's not always supposed to make people feel good. In this sense, Schneider sees humor as a tool for social critique, a way to address difficult or controversial topics in a way that's both accessible and engaging. By avoiding these topics for fear of backlash, Schneider argues that comedians are not only limiting their own creative potential, but also robbing society of a valuable connection for wrestling with its most pressing issues. Schneider's viewpoint is not without its critics, many of whom argue that comedy should evolve with the times and be more sensitive to the impact of certain jokes. Critics point out that while comedy can be a powerful tool for addressing social issues, it can also reinforce harmful stereotypes or marginalize vulnerable groups. This is particularly true when jokes are made at the expense of minorities or historically oppressed communities. In response, Schneider has defended his belief that comedy should be judged by its intent rather than its impact. "If a joke is meant to be funny and not malicious, that's all that matters," he has said. He acknowledges that humor is subjective. What one person finds offensive, another might find hilarious, but he argues that comedians shouldn't be held responsible for how their jokes are received. The debate over wokeness in comedy has created a clear divide within the field. On one side are comedians like Schneider, who believe in the importance of free speech and the need to push boundaries, even if it means offending people. On the other side are comedians who support a more socially conscious approach to humor, one that's mindful of the potential harm that jokes can cause. This divide mirrors broader cultural and political divides in society, where questions about free speech, political correctness, and inclusivity are increasingly contentious. His fans support him even after his speeches stating, "Been a fan of the funny guy all my life. Now he has my respect and admiration." While it's clear that Schneider's views on wokeness and political correctness have made him a controversial figure in Hollywood, they've also sparked important conversations about the role of humor in society. Whether you agree with him or not, Schneider's rebellion in the face of criticism serves as a reminder of the ongoing tension between free speech and the pressure to cooperate to certain cultural ideals. Rob Schneider's battle against wokeness is not just about his right to make edgy jokes. It's about a broader cultural struggle over free speech, political correctness, and the future of comedy. His critiques tap into deep societal tensions as people grapple with questions about what can and cannot be said in today's world. While Schneider's refusal to back down has made him an unsettling figure, it has also made him a symbol of the fight for free speech at a time when many feel that expression is increasingly constrained. Whether Hollywood continues to embrace wokeness or shifts back toward a more open, unfiltered approach to comedy remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. Comedians like Rob Schneider will continue to push back against what they see as the oppressive effects of political correctness, making sure that the debate over free speech in comedy will remain a hot topic for years to come. In the end, Schneider's viewpoint serves as a reminder of the importance of protecting the creative freedom that allows comedians to reflect, critique, and challenge society, even when it makes us uncomfortable.